When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Librarian. User: 1618 Librarian. Posted January 2nd, 1997.
Most people, when they think about the Library of Alexandria at all, imagine a single grand building burning down in a single terrible blaze, but that's not how it happened. The Royal Library was the first to go in 48 BCE when Caesar realized the only way he could defeat the Ptolemaic fleet besieging the city was by burning it. According to Plutarch, the fire used against the fleet quickly spread from the dockyards to the city, claiming the library entirely by accident. The remaining library was protected within a temple known as the Serapeum until 391, when Emperor Theodosius I decided that it was time to wipe away all remnants of paganism. This empowered Theophilus, the Bishop of Alexandria, to take the Serapeum, toppling the statue of Serapis himself and allowing his zealots to destroy everything else. As a professional archivist, I'm not telling tales when I say that I've lost more than a single night's sleep thinking about the collective knowledge humanity lost with the destruction of Alexandria's libraries. The one thing that used to calm me down was the thought that we knew better, that the modern era had a regard for knowledge those ancients didn't. At least here in the West, we were unlikely to be swept by a war in which knowledge might be placed in the crosshairs. I was so very wrong. There is a war against knowledge taking place, but it is a silent war, being played out in conference rooms and library stacks across the country, and its casualties are hundreds, if not thousands, of volumes of knowledge which do not exist anywhere else. First, I have to explain a little about how museum and archival collections are curated. What you see on display in museums and academic libraries represent only a portion of what the collection actually holds. There's nothing overtly sinister about this, there just isn't room to display everything, and even if you did, the amount of information would be overwhelming to the average visitor. What I've noticed, though, is that over time, administrative committees ruled certain volumes were no longer to be displayed because they, quote, portray as fact experiences that contradict both the teachings of established modern science and religious doctrine. End quote. Sit with that for a minute. Really, sit with it and consider what that means. If science or religion said something wasn't possible, it didn't matter how many objective observers had recorded it. Hercule Vercarteren's Le Labyrinth de Dessous lays out the path into a vast stone netherworld using geometric movement patterns later verified by Pascal Lafitte in Un monde parmi tant d'autres. Too bad, my friend, current science says no such place can exist, and the holy rollers say the only path out of this world is into Jesus' arms. Would you believe me if I told you that back in 1854, an Egyptian fisherman pulled up not only a net full of perch, but a completely sealed piece of pottery that he broke open to reveal a stiff sort of parchment with markings he found indecipherable. What if I said that the pottery was carbon dated back to Egypt's pre-dynastic Nagata period, its exterior sealed against water with glaze of a composition as yet undetermined? Or that the stiff parchment was a modern Egyptian driver's license bearing the name and photograph of a man named Noor El-Masri? Or that a man with the same name and face as the man in the photograph was reported missing and presumed dead after lightning struck 3 fuel tanks near the town of Dranka last year? Science can't explain it. Neither can religion, and so after Mr. El-Masri's paperwork found its way to our collection, it was banished to the furthest reaches of it. The books and papers had been shelved in our basement, an underworld of its own for years, and I could live with that. The knowledge at least survived, but now word has come down from on high that these parts of the collection must be purged completely. They actually used that goddamn word, purge, if you can believe it. The good Germans have already started burning them, and no one knows, at least no one who is willing or able to stop it. One of my colleagues who is as appalled at this monstrous destruction of the historical record as I am told me about this BBS, and it may be the only place I can store these soon-to-be-lost secrets. Over the coming months, I will be sneaking items slated for destruction home and sharing as much of the information as possible. To take them permanently in the current environment would raise a flag, but to take the information and spread its essence as far and wide as this internet will allow, they'll never know, but you will. Call me the Librarian. You'll hear from me again soon.
Subject, next time. User, ztrucko64. Posted, November 4th, 1999.
My ex-wife Nell used to believe in psychics, and it drove me nuts. She couldn't make a single decision without consulting a seer or a healer or some other goddamn hippie waving a pendulum. Her parents died when she was young, so I know where it was coming from, but still, it put my teeth on edge. When we couldn't afford a trip to one of those hedge wizard con artists, she'd pull out a deck of tarot cards or that stupid Ouija board. She'd beg me to sit down and help her figure out which community college course her grandfather wanted her to take, or why so-and-so at the Piggly Wiggly didn't like her. I always said no. Someone in the family had to keep their feet planted firmly in reality, and she'd cry and the whole thing would go in circles. It was such a pain in my ass that I almost didn't mind when she ran off with some patchouli and granola type she'd met at a sound bath, whatever the hell that is. My job requires a lot of car travel, mostly through little towns in northern Washington and Idaho, Omak, Grand Coulee, Bonners Ferry, places like that. Nell used to hate that I was away so much, but I'd tell her until she figured out what she wanted to be, someone had to earn a living, and the way I earn mine is on the move. Hell, I'd call her every couple days and tell myself, what more does she want? To say it plainly, I'd think about calling her more than that, but I didn't want to give her reason to think she had any power over me. That's something my old man taught me. They should always think you've got one foot out the door so they don't start getting notions. Some days, I regret listening to him as much as I did. Usually on the days I pick up the phone to call Nell and remember I can't, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Nell left in the summer of '89 while I was out of town. I remember knowing something was wrong right away when She wasn't waiting for me at the screen door. She used to say she could hear my engine coming a half-mile away. But this time, she wasn't there, and the old door creaked more than it ever had before. Everything was louder, my footsteps, the sound of my duffel bag dropping on the kitchen floor, the hum of the fridge. I went to the bedroom to see if she'd fallen asleep, but as soon as I saw her clothes were gone, I knew. She'd taken her journal too, except for a page she'd torn to leave me a note on my pillow. I don't even remember what it said. I was so mad, I ripped the damn thing up and flushed it down the toilet. Now, after everything, I wish to hell I'd kept it, but that's how it goes. After the divorce, I started working nonstop. My supervisor, Ernie, was over the moon because I was an earner, and before long, we were both rolling in it. Having cash in your pocket makes it easier to make friends on the road, and I had a few of them. Blondes, brunettes, tall, short, skinny, fat. I kept the ring on because I preferred the kind of girls who saw it as a challenge, and at least that's what I told myself and anyone who asked. In the summer of '94, work picked up some new accounts in Chula and Kettle Falls, so I found myself driving those state highways more than ever, making even more money. Of course, I was hitting the bottle harder too. By the spring of '95, you might say my engine was running in the red. Too much booze, too much flake, too many girls. The only thing I wasn't overdoing was sleep. Even on nights I didn't have company, I'd lay awake on my motel bed, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes I'd pick up the phone and dial the house number like I used to. Sometimes I'd even let it go through, and sometimes I'd wait till the answering machine picked up and Nell's voice told me to leave a message. I was away from home so much I never got around to recording a new message. At least that's what I told myself and anyone who asked. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, and I had no idea what she was doing or with who. Then, that same spring, I was driving somewhere up in those mountains, and Nell was hitching by the side of the road. She hadn't changed a bit. If anything, she looked better than ever before in a loose red t-shirt and little jean shorts. For a second, I assumed it had to have been my imagination, that I was mistaking some other girl for her. I was coming off one hell of an all-nighter at a biker hangout in Omak, but the closer she got, the more certain I was. Then, I saw that smile and knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was looking at my wife, ex-wife. When Nell saw me, she waved both arms in the air as if she was worried I might miss her. I pulled my Chrysler over to the side of the road, maybe a dozen feet past her, and she raced to catch up, her golden legs pumping in the sun. Jesus, she was beautiful, I remember thinking. After she got in the car, she pushed all that curly red hair back behind her ears and smiled at me again. She was different, lighter maybe, like she didn't have a worry in the world. I thought about how she looked the last few times I came home, and it hurt to see the difference, to see what our life together had taken out of her. I didn't know what to say, so I just asked, "What are you doing out here in the middle of nowhere, Red?" She punched my arm the way she used to. "Waiting for you, Goofy. What took you so long?" I sputtered a bit and she laughed. "I'm going west, Goofy. Drive me?" I nodded. "Yeah, of course. Don't you have any bags?" She shook her head, her curls dancing. "No baggage. I'm traveling light these days." I nosed the Chrysler back onto the road and hit the gas. "It's good to see you, Red. I trailed off. "It's been a while." "I guess it has," she said. "The time hasn't been kind to you, Goofy. You look like shit." I laughed. She'd never spoken to me like that the entire time I'd known her. "You know me, Red. Busy working. Ernie keeps me on the road pretty steady." "Nah, Goofy, that's all you. You like being on the road. It means you never have to sit still and deal with what's inside you." My smile faded. "Hey, Someone has to pay the bills. She cut me off. No, Goofy, you can't blame me anymore. You do what you do because of you and no one else. I loved you so much, and all it did was make you cruel to me. I understand it now, but for so long I couldn't understand what I was doing wrong. Even after I left, for years I would go over it in my mind, wondering how could I have reached him? But I know now that there's nothing I could have done. You need to look inside you, Goofy, and start trying to pick apart that mess. If you don't, you'll never be happy, and I want you to be happy. I looked out my window and pressed down a little harder on the gas. Like you, Red, did you pick apart that mess? All that psychic bullshit, all that time you wasted fretting about what to do instead of actually doing anything? She sighed. I never did, no. I see it for what it was now, but it's harder when you're in it. That's why I'm not mad at you anymore, Goofy. You're in it and can't see the edges, but this is an opportunity for you to fix that. And I'll be with you the whole way. We'll do better next time, I know it. I turned toward her to ask what next time meant, but never got that far. My last memory is the sound of grinding metal and glass stinging my face. When I woke up in the Spokane hospital a week later, the doctors told me I'd fallen asleep at the wheel and plowed into a Douglas fir at a minimum of 50 miles an hour. My back was broken, he said, but I'd been incredibly lucky because the spinal cord was intact, and in time, with some rehabilitation, I'd be fine. I barely heard him, though, because all I could think about was Nell. I asked the doctor how she was doing, but he just frowned. My wife, I said, how is she? Can I see her? The doctor shook his head and told me I'd been brought in alone. I fought with him as much as I could, explaining that I'd been talking to Nell when the crash happened, but he insisted that I was the only person the EMTs had found and there was no indication of a second person in the wreckage. I was so stirred up, they had to sedate me. It took 2 weeks for me to make any sense of it. When I was well enough, I made a few calls. Nell didn't have many friends to begin with, and most of them were the kinds of people who didn't keep their phone numbers for very long. In the end, I managed to track down her half-sister, Rebecca. I lied, of course, told her I still had some of Nell's stuff and wanted to get it out of my house. Part of me half expected the response I got, but it didn't make hearing it any easier. Nell was gone, but not with me in that car crash. In the winter of 1996, she'd been hit when a drunk driver ran a red light. She was living in Missoula, Montana at the time, Rebecca said, going to school. It took me the better part of 2 years to get back on my feet properly. Even now, I can't drive for long stretches like I used to, so I switched jobs and spend more time at home than ever before. It's still too quiet, and not a day goes by that I don't think about that accident and the conversation with Nell, which sure didn't feel like any dream I've had before. She said she'd be around, and I took her at her word. Even now, with Y2K bearing down, I talk out loud and hope she can hear me. I tell her I'm trying to be better and that I miss her, and that I hope there really is a next time so I can get it right.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast. before the server goes offline.